Picture this. A broken rancher loading his final belongings after losing everything, ready to abandon his failed ranch forever. That was me, Benjamin Crawford, until I heard children's voices coming from my barn. What I discovered changed everything. 7 abandoned siblings, ages 4 to 12, who'd been surviving on their own for weeks. When the youngest one looked up at me with tear-filled eyes and called my crumbling ranch home, I knew I couldn't just walk away. These children didn't just need shelter. They needed someone to believe in their dreams. And somehow they gave me back my will to live and showed me that families aren't just born. They're built by choice, love, and the courage to start over. If you've ever felt like giving up on everything, this story will restore your faith in second chances. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of chosen family. Subscribe for more heartwarming stories of hope and redemption. And ring the bell, because what these 7 children called me next will bring tears to your eyes. The October morning. Air bit sharp and cold as I loaded the last of my belongings into the wagon. 15 years I'd built this ranch from nothing, and now I was walking away from it all. The sold sign nailed to my gatepost felt like a tombstone marking the death of everything I'd once believed in. My name is Benjamin Crawford, though most folks just call me Ben. At 44, I'd thought I had my whole life figured out. A successful ranch, a loving wife named Sarah, and 3 beautiful children. Emma, 12, Luke, 9, and little Molly, just 6. Then diphtheria swept through our valley 3 winters ago, taking them all within a week. The disease that killed my family also killed my will to keep fighting. I'd let the ranch deteriorate these past 3 years. Half my cattle had wandered off or died from neglect. The fences were falling down, the roof leaked in a dozen places, and weeds had overtaken Sarah's vegetable garden. When the bank offered to buy the land to settle my debts, I jumped at the chance to escape the memories that haunted every corner of this place. Time to go, I muttered to myself, climbing onto the wagon seat. I had enough money for a train ticket to San Francisco, where my brother lived. He'd offered me work in his shipping business, a chance to start over somewhere that didn't echo with the ghosts of my past. I was about to snap the reins when I heard it, a faint sound coming from the direction of the barn. At first, I thought it might be the wind rattling the loose boards, but there it was again. Voices. Children's voices. My heart clenched. Sometimes I still heard Emma's laughter on the wind, or Luke calling for me from the fields. The mind played cruel tricks when it was grieving, but the voices came again, definitely real this time. Multiple voices, urgent and hushed. Against my better judgment, I climbed down from the wagon and walked toward the barn. The big doors were slightly ajar, and I could see movement in the shadows inside. My hand instinctively went to the pistol on my hip. Could be rustlers or drifters who'd taken shelter for the night. Who's in there? I called out. The voices immediately went silent, but I could hear shuffling and what sounded like children whispering frantically to each other. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. What I saw made me freeze in place. Huddled in the far corner of the barn, surrounded by old horse blankets and what looked like scraps of food, were 7 children. 7. They ranged in age from what appeared to be about 12 down to maybe 4 years old, all thin and dirty, wearing clothes that had seen much better days. The oldest, a girl with dark hair and fierce brown eyes, stood protectively in front of the others. She held a rusty pitchfork like a weapon, though her hands were shaking. "Don't come any closer, mister," she said, trying to sound brave. "We ain't stealing nothing. We're just resting." I raised my hands to show I meant no harm. "Easy there. I'm not going to hurt anyone. This is my barn. What are you children doing here? Your barn?" The girl's face fell. We didn't know anybody lived here. The place looked empty. I looked around at my neglected property through their eyes. Broken windows, peeling paint, an air of abandonment. No wonder they'd thought it was deserted. Where are your parents? I asked gently. The children exchanged glances. The oldest girl's. Shin trembled before she answered. Dead. Ma died having the baby. She gestured to the smallest child, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 4. Pa died in a mine accident 2 months ago. We been taking care of ourselves, piped up a boy who looked about 10. Margaret here knows how to cook and clean, and I can hunt rabbits. Margaret, the oldest girl. She looked so much like my Emma. It made my chest ache. Where have you been living? I asked. Wherever we can find shelter, Margaret replied. Abandoned cabins, under bridges, in old barns like this one. We keep moving so the law don't catch us and split us up. The youngest child, the little boy, stepped out from behind his siblings and looked up at me with enormous blue eyes. His face was streaked with dirt, but his expression was hopeful. Mister, he said in a tiny voice, is this place home? The question hit me like a physical blow. Home. This place hadn't felt like home since my family died. I'd been so eager to leave it behind, to escape the memories and the pain. What's your name, son? I asked, kneeling down to his level. Tommy Walsh. That's Margaret, and that's Patrick, and that's Catherine, and that's Daniel, and that's Rose, and that's Michael. He pointed to each of his siblings in turn. We're looking for a home. I studied these 7 children, the Walsh family, orphaned and homeless, surviving by their wits and their fierce loyalty to each other. Margaret couldn't have been more than 12, but she was clearly the one holding them all together. How long have you been in my barn? I asked. 3 days, Margaret admitted. We saw the place looked empty, and it's been getting cold at night. We didn't take nothing, mister. I swear. 3 days. 3 days they'd been here while I'd been packing to leave forever. If I'd left yesterday as originally planned, I never would have found them. You hungry? I asked. 7 pairs of eyes stared at me hopefully. When was the last time they'd had a proper meal? I might have some food in the house, I said. But first, you all need to get cleaned up. There's a pump behind the house, and I think I can find some clean clothes. You're not going to turn us over to the authorities? Margaret asked suspiciously. I looked at these 7 children who'd somehow found their way to my abandoned barn, and I thought about the wagon loaded with my belongings, ready to carry me away from this place forever. Not today, I said, leading. Them to the house felt surreal. I hadn't had children's voices here since my own had died. The Walsh children walked quietly, almost reverently, taking in everything with wide eyes. This is a real nice place, mister, said the boy Margaret had. Called Patrick. You must be rich. Rich, if only he knew how poor I'd felt these past 3 years. How empty this house had been despite all its rooms and possessions. Call me Ben, I said. And it's not as nice as it used to be. I found some of my children's old clothes in the chest upstairs, clothes I'd been unable to bear giving away or throwing out. Seeing these orphan children wear them felt right somehow, like Emma and Luke and Molly were giving their blessing. While the children cleaned up and changed clothes, I searched my nearly empty pantry for something to feed them. One found some beans, a bit of bacon, and the makings for biscuits. It would have to do. As I cooked, I could hear them talking quietly in the next room. They were trying to figure out my intentions, whether I could be trusted, how long they might be able to stay. The weight of responsibility in Margaret's young voice reminded me painfully of how Emma had tried to take care of her younger siblings when they were all sick. Mr. Ben? Tommy appeared in the kitchen doorway. Can I help? Sure, son. You can. Set the table. I watched him carefully place forks and knives around my dining table, a table that had sat empty for 3 years. His small hands could barely reach the surface, but he worked with serious concentration. "Mr. Ben, do you got any kids?" The question I'd been dreading. I did. They died a few years ago. Tommy nodded solemnly. "That's sad. Were they nice kids?" "The best kids in the world? I bet they was. This feels like a house where nice kids lived." When the food was ready, I called them all to the table. Watching 7 hungry children fill the chairs that had sat empty for so long was overwhelming. They ate quietly but gratefully, and I noticed how Margaret made sure the younger ones got the larger portions. "This is the best meal we've had in weeks," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Ben. Where will you go next?" I asked, though I wasn't sure. I wanted to hear the answer. Margaret's face grew worried. "We was hoping to make it to California before winter sets in. Heard there's work in the orange groves, and they don't ask too many questions about families. California. Hundreds of miles away, with winter coming on. These children would never make it." "That's a long way to travel," I said carefully. "We'll manage," Margaret replied with a fierce determination that seemed to define her. "We always do." After dinner, as the sun began to set, I faced the hardest decision I'd made since choosing to sell the ranch. My wagon was still loaded, ready to take me away from this place forever. But looking at these 7 children who'd somehow found their way into my life, I couldn't imagine just leaving them to fend for themselves. "It's getting dark," I said finally. "You can sleep in the house tonight. There are beds upstairs." The relief on their faces was immediate and profound. "Really?" Rose, who looked to be about 8, asked hopefully. "Really. But just for tonight," I added, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. That night, as I listened to the sound of children settling into beds that had been empty for 3 years, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell I was supposed to do now. I woke before dawn to the sound of quiet voices downstairs. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. It had been so long since there were children's voices in my house. But as consciousness fully returned, I remembered 7 orphan children sleeping under my roof, my wagon still loaded and ready to carry me away from everything. I dressed quickly and made my way downstairs, where I found Margaret in the kitchen, trying to start a fire in the stove. The other children were gathered around the table, waiting quietly. "You don't need to do that," I said gently. "I can make breakfast." "It's no trouble, Mr. Ben," Margaret replied. "I've been cooking for them for months now. I know how they like their eggs." I watched her work, noting how naturally she'd taken on the maternal role, despite being only 12. She moved around the kitchen with efficient purpose, clearly experienced in caring for her siblings. "Margaret," I said, "sit down. Let me cook this morning." She hesitated, then nodded and took a seat beside Tommy, who immediately climbed into her lap. The devotion between these children was evident in every gesture, every glance. They were more than siblings. They were a unit, bound together by loss and survival. As I prepared breakfast, I found myself thinking about my loaded wagon waiting outside. I'd planned to be on the road by now, leaving this place in my past forever. Instead, I was cooking for 7 children who desperately needed someone to care about their future. "Mr. Ben," Patrick said as we ate, "this house is real nice. How come you don't got no family living here?" The direct question from the 10-year-old hit me hard. "I told you, son. My family died." "But you could get a new family," suggested Catherine, who appeared to be about 9. "That's what we're going to do when we get to California." "It's not that simple," I said. "Why not?" Tommy asked with the innocent logic of a 4-year-old. "We need a family, and you need a family." Seemed simple to me. After breakfast, I told the children I had some thinking to do and walked outside to my loaded wagon. Everything I owned that mattered was packed there, ready for a new life in San Francisco. But as I stood looking at it, I realized something had shifted inside me overnight. "You leaving us now?" came a small voice behind me. I turned to find Tommy watching me with those enormous blue eyes, his expression worried but not surprised. This child had learned early that adults often left without warning. "I don't know yet, son. If you leave, can we stay in your barn a little longer? Just until it gets warmer?" The simple request broke something open in my chest. "Tommy, where? Do you want to live? Really live, I mean, not just survive." "Here," he said without hesitation. "This feels like home. Margaret says we can't stay 'cause it belongs to you, but I dreamed last night that we lived here forever and ever." Before I could respond, Margaret appeared, clearly having come looking for Tommy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ben," she said quickly. "Tommy, you shouldn't be bothering Mr. Ben with foolish talk." "It's not foolish," I said, surprised by my own words. "Tommy, what if I told you there might be a way for you all to stay here?" Margaret's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I looked at these two children, the oldest trying so hard to be responsible for everyone, the youngest still innocent enough to believe in dreams, and made a decision that shocked me. "I mean, maybe this place needs a family as much as you need a home." The hope that flashed across Margaret's face was immediately tempered by wariness. "We can't pay you nothing, Mr. Ben. We ain't got any money." "I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about—" I paused, hardly believing what I was about to say. "I'm talking about adoption. About making this legal and permanent." "Adoption?" Margaret whispered. "All 7 of you, together, as my children." The silence that followed was profound. Margaret stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language, while Tommy bounced on his toes with excitement. "You mean it?" Tommy asked. "Really and truly?" I looked around at my neglected ranch, at my loaded wagon, at these 2 children who represented 7 souls in need of love and stability. "Yes, I mean it." Margaret's composure finally cracked, and tears began streaming down her face. "But why? You don't even know us." "Because," I said, the truth becoming clear even as I spoke it, "I've been dead inside for 3 years, walking around like a ghost, just waiting to leave this world behind. But you children, you make this place feel alive again." That afternoon, I unloaded my wagon and sent a telegram to my brother in San Francisco, explaining that my plans had changed. The 7 Walsh children sat on my porch, still hardly daring to believe that their wandering days might be over. "What happens now?" asked Daniel, who I'd learned was 7 years old and surprisingly thoughtful. "Now we figure out how to be a family," I said. "But we already are a family," Rose pointed out. "We just need someone to take care of us official-like." She was right. These children had been a family long before I found them in my barn. The question was whether an old, broken-down rancher could learn to be the father they deserved. The next few days, I began to understand the magnitude of what I'd taken on. 7 children meant 7 sets of clothes, 7 appetites, 7 different personalities and needs. Margaret helped enormously, her experience caring for her siblings invaluable, but I could see the relief in her eyes as some of the burden shifted to adult shoulders. "You don't have to do everything yourself anymore," I told her one evening as she helped me plan meals for the week. "I know," she said quietly. "It's just ... I've been responsible for them for so long, I don't know how. To not worry about everything. You're 12 years old, Margaret. You should be worrying about 12-year-old things, not about keeping 6 other children alive." "What are 12-year-old things?" she asked, and the question broke my heart. This child had been forced to grow up far too fast. Reading books for fun instead of just trying to teach others. Playing games. Maybe learning to ride a horse properly. I paused, being a kid. The transformation wasn't immediate, but gradually I began to see glimpses of the child Margaret should have been allowed to be. Patrick revealed a natural talent with animals, helping me tend the few remaining cattle with an intuition that reminded me of myself at his age. Catherine had a gift for organization, taking charge of the household supplies with impressive efficiency, but it was Tommy who continued to surprise me most. Despite being the youngest, he seemed to understand instinctively that I needed healing. As much as they needed shelter, he would appear at my side during difficult moments, offering small hands to help with work or simply standing quietly nearby when words weren't needed. "Mr. Ben," he said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, "are you sad about your other kids?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it's different now. It's not the kind of sad that makes it hard to breathe. It's the kind of sad that reminds me I was lucky to love them." "That's good sad," Tommy declared with 4-year-old wisdom. "The bad sad makes you want to go away forever. A good sad makes you want to stay and love more people." 2 weeks after finding them in my barn, I rode to town to speak with Judge Morrison about the legal requirements for adoption. The children waited anxiously for my return, clearly fearing that I might change my mind or discover some insurmountable obstacle. "It's going to take some time," I told them that evening. "There's paperwork, and they want to make sure the children will be properly cared for. But Judge Morrison thinks it can be done." "How long?" Margaret asked. "Maybe 6 months, maybe longer." "And we can stay here the whole time?" Rose asked hopefully. "You can stay here forever," I said firmly. "The adoption is just to make it official. You're already my family." That night, as I tucked Tommy into what had once been Luke's bed, he looked up at me with those trusting blue eyes. "Mr. Ben, when the adoption is done, will you be our real papa?" "I'm already your real papa, son, in every way that matters." "Good," he said sleepily. "I always wanted a papa like you." As I closed his door and prepared for bed myself, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a broken man preparing to flee from painful memories. Now I was the father of 7 children, with a house full of laughter and chaos and the kind of purposeful noise that comes from a family learning to live together. The ranch still needed work. The fences still needed mending, and there were 100 practical challenges ahead. But for the first time in 3 years, I had a reason to fix what was broken instead of just walking away from it. These 7 children had called my land home when it had felt like nothing but a graveyard. To me, in doing so, they'd given me back not just a purpose, but a future worth building. Winter came early that year, but instead of the lonely, bitter cold I'd experienced for the past 3 years, the season brought cozy evenings by the fire with 7 children who transformed my house into something I'd never thought it could be again. A home filled with love and laughter. The legal adoption process moved slowly, requiring character references, home inspections, and endless paperwork. Judge Morrison was sympathetic but thorough, wanting to ensure the children's welfare was properly protected. During one of his visits, he found Tommy teaching Rose how to read using one of my old books, while Margaret helped Catherine with arithmetic, and Patrick showed Daniel how to whittle. "Remarkable," the judge murmured to me. "I've seen families with every advantage who don't show half the devotion these children have for each other and for you." "They're remarkable children," I agreed. "No, Ben, what's remarkable is how you've all chosen to become a family despite the circumstances that brought you together." As winter deepened, I began to truly understand what I'd taken on. 7 children meant 7 different personalities, 7 sets of needs, and 7 individual relationships to build. Michael, the quietest at age 6, had a deep love for animals, and could often be found in the barn talking to the horses. Rose possessed an artistic soul, drawing pictures of our family with careful attention to including everyone. Daniel had inherited his older siblings' protective instincts, always watching out for the younger ones. But it was Margaret who continued to amaze me most. Gradually, as she began to trust that I wouldn't disappear or abandon them, she started to let herself be a child again. I found her reading purely for pleasure, laughing at Patrick's jokes, and even occasionally asking me for help instead of trying to handle everything herself. "Mr. Ben," she said one snowy evening as we sat by the fire, "can I ask you something? Personal, of course. Do you think your wife and children would have liked us?" The question caught me off guard. I looked around at these 7 remarkable young people who'd brought such life back into my home, and I realized I could think about Sarah and my lost children without the crushing pain that had defined the past 3 years. "I think Sarah would have loved you all immediately," I said honestly. She always wanted a house full of children. And Emma, Luke, and Molly. They would have been so excited to have brothers and sisters. "I wish we could have met them," Tommy said from where he was curled up beside me. "In a way you have," I said. "Everything good I'm able to give you comes from what they taught me about being a father." Spring brought new challenges and new growth. I decided to rebuild the ranch operation, partly out of necessity. Feeding 7 growing children required more income than my savings could provide indefinitely, but mostly because I'd rediscovered my love for the land and the work. Patrick proved to have a natural gift with cattle, while Margaret showed an unexpected aptitude for managing the ranches. Finances. Even the younger children found ways to contribute, with Tommy appointed as official egg collector and Rose taking charge of the vegetable garden that had once been Sarah's pride. "This place is coming back to life," commented Doc Peterson during one of his visits. "Not just the ranch, but you too, men." He was right. I'd gained weight, my step was livelier, and I found myself whistling while I worked, something I hadn't done since before the diphtheria took my family. The adoption papers were finally approved on a warm day in May. Judge Morrison came to the ranch personally to conduct the ceremony, wanting to mark the occasion properly. All 7 children stood beside me as he read the official decree that made them legally mine. "Benjamin Crawford," he announced, "you are hereby granted full custody and parental rights to Margaret Walsh Crawford, Patrick Walsh Crawford, Catherine Walsh Crawford, Daniel Walsh Crawford, Rose Walsh Crawford, Michael Walsh Crawford, and Thomas Walsh Crawford." The children beamed at hearing their new names, but Tommy raised his hand with a serious expression. "Judge Morrison, sir? Does this mean Mr. Ben is really our papa now?" "It means he was always your papa, son. This just makes it official." That evening, we celebrated with a feast that Margaret and Catherine had been planning for weeks. As we sat around the table, a table that had been silent for so long and was now filled with animated conversation about the day's events, I marveled at the journey that had brought us all together. "Papa Ben," Rose said, testing out the new title, "can we put up a sign at the gate? One that says, 'Crawford Family Ranch'?" "I think that's a wonderful idea," I replied. "And can we plant flowers by Mama Sarah's grave?" Catherine asked. "So she knows we're taking good care of you." The thoughtfulness of the question brought tears to my eyes. These children had somehow understood that honoring my past was part of building our future together. She'd love that, I managed to say later that night, as I made my rounds checking on each child, a ritual that had become sacred to me. I found Tommy still awake, staring out his window at the stars. "Can't sleep." "Son? Just thinking, Papa Ben, about how we was so scared when we first saw you, and now you're our real papa forever. Sometimes the best things come when we least expect them," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Do you think God planned for us to find your barn? Like maybe he knew you needed us as much as we needed you?" I considered the question. "A year. ago, I would have said there was no God, or if there was, he'd abandoned me. But looking at this little boy who'd called my desolate ranch home and somehow convinced me to stay, I wasn't so sure. Maybe he did, Tommy. Maybe he did. I'm glad, Tommy said sleepily, because this is the best home ever. As I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, something that had become as natural as breathing, I reflected on the man I'd been just 8 months ago. That Ben Crawford had been preparing to leave everything behind, convinced that his life was over and his capacity for happiness was buried with his first family. But these 7 remarkable children had shown me that love doesn't diminish. When it's shared, it multiplies. My heart hadn't betrayed Sarah and Emma and Luke and Molly by learning to love again. It had honored them by proving that the love they'd taught me was strong enough to heal not just my own brokenness, but the brokenness of 7 orphaned children who'd needed someone to believe in them. The Crawford family ranch was thriving now, with healthy cattle, mended fences, and a house full of the kind of joyful chaos that comes from a large, loving family. But more than the physical improvements, what had been restored was hope, theirs and mine. I thought I was saving 7 abandoned children when I found them in my barn. But the truth was, they'd saved me right back. In calling my land home, they'd given me back my life, my purpose, and my faith in tomorrow. We were the Crawford family now. Ben, Margaret, Patrick, Catherine, Daniel, Rose, Michael, and Tommy. Proof that families aren't just born. They're built by choice, by love, and by the courage to believe that broken hearts can heal each other when they're brave enough to try. 1 year later, I stood on my porch watching Margaret help Tommy with his reading, while Patrick and Daniel repaired a fence. Catherine tended her expanded vegetable garden, and Rose painted a picture of our rebuilt barn. The transformation was complete, not just of the ranch, but of all of us. The Crawford family ranch sign Rose had requested now hung proudly at our gate, hand-painted by Michael in letters that grew steadier with each word. Below it, in smaller script, were the words Home of the Crawford 7, Tommy's idea, since he said it sounded like an outlaw gang, but the good kind that helped people. Papa Ben, Rose called from where she sat with her easel. Come see. I painted all of us. I walked over to admire her latest artwork, a colorful rendering of our family standing in front of the house, with Mama Sarah included as an angel watching over us from a cloud. Rose had insisted on including Sarah in all her family pictures, saying that first mamas don't stop being mamas just because they go to heaven. It's beautiful, sweetheart. We'll hang it in the parlor with the others. The parlor walls were now covered with Rose's artwork, Tommy's first attempts at writing his name, and Margaret's careful household schedules. It was cluttered and chaotic, and absolutely perfect. Papa, Catherine said, approaching with a serious expression that reminded me she was growing up faster than I liked. Mrs. Henderson from town asked if we wanted to come to our daughter's birthday party next week. What did you tell her? That I'd ask you. But Papa, some of the kids at church still whisper about us, about how we're not your real children. I knelt down so I was at eye level with my thoughtful 11-year-old daughter. Catherine, what makes a family real? Love, she said immediately, and taking care of each other, and choosing to stay together even when things get hard. Then, we're as real as any family that ever existed. And if anyone says different, you send them to talk to me. She smiled and hugged me tight. I love you, Papa. I love you too, sweetheart. All of you. More than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, now expanded to accommodate our family of 8, Margaret made an announcement that surprised everyone. Papa Ben, I've been thinking about something, she said in her careful, serious way. I want to learn to read better. like really well. So maybe someday I could be a teacher. That's a wonderful goal, Margaret, but you already read very well. I want to read like the teachers in town, with big words and fancy books. I want to help other children learn things. Patrick looked up from his plate. If Margaret gets to have a fancy dream, I want one too. I want to have the biggest ranch in Colorado someday, with 1,000 cattle. 1,000? Daniel's eyes went wide. Maybe 2,000, Patrick amended, grinning. Soon all the children were sharing their dreams. Catherine wanted to own a dress shop. Daniel hoped to be a doctor like Doc Peterson. Rose planned to paint pictures for books. Michael wanted to train horses. And Tommy ... Tommy wanted to be a papa just like Papa Ben. What about you, Papa? Tommy asked. What's your dream? I looked around the table at these 7 remarkable young people who'd given me back my life, and I realized my dream was already sitting right here. My dream is to see all of your dreams come true, I said, and to be the best father I can be to each of you, for as long as you'll have me. Forever, Tommy declared with 4-year-old certainty that had become 5-year-old certainty. We're gonna keep you forever. Later that night, I made my usual rounds, checking on each child before bed. It was a routine that had become sacred to me. These quiet moments when I could see that they were safe, healthy, and home got in Margaret's room. I found her reading by lamplight, working her way through one of the more challenging books from my small library. Don't stay up too late, I said softly. Papa Ben, thank you for believing in my dream about being a teacher. Thank you for giving me dreams again. Patrick was already asleep, but his journal lay open on his knitstand. I could see where he'd been practicing writing and had drawn pictures of cattle with careful attention to detail. Catherine had fallen asleep while working on a dress pattern for her doll. Her careful stitches showing the same attention to detail she brought to everything she did. Daniel slept with a medical book. I'd bought him from town, probably too advanced for a 9-year-old, but he studied it with the dedication of a much older student. Rose's room was filled with her artwork, including a new painting of our family that now included Ranger, the 3 barn cats, and the old horse we'd rescued from a neighbor who could no longer care for him. Michael had built an elaborate fort out of blankets and pillows, and I could see him sleeping peacefully inside his creation, surrounded by the carved horses he'd been making. Finally, I came to Tony's room. He was sitting up in bed, waiting for me as he often did. Papa Ben, can I tell you a secret? Always, son. Sometimes I dream about Mama and Papa Walsh, and I used to feel sad about them being gone forever. And now I think maybe they're not gone forever. Maybe they just went ahead to get ready for us, like when you go to town early to make sure there's supplies for all of us. The wisdom of this child never ceased to amaze me. That's a beautiful way to think about it, Tommy. And Papa Ben, I think Mama and Papa Walsh would really like you, because you take good care of us just like they did. As I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, Tommy added sleepily, Papa Ben, are you happy we called your land home that first day? Son, that was the most important word anyone has ever said to me. Standing in the hallway outside Tommy's room, I marveled at the journey that had brought us all here. 18 months ago, I'd been a broken man, loading a wagon to flee from painful memories. I'd been ready to abandon everything, convinced that my capacity for happiness had died with my first family. But 7 abandoned children had seen something I couldn't see, that this wasn't a place to escape from, but a place to build something beautiful. They'd called my failing ranch home when I'd been ready to call it goodbye forever. In doing so, they'd given me the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to discover that love isn't finite, that hearts can heal without forgetting, and that families can be built by choice just as surely as they're built by blood. The Crawford family ranch was thriving now, with healthy cattle, productive fields, and a house that rang with laughter every day. But the real success wasn't measured in livestock or crops. It was measured in 7 children who felt secure enough to dream about their futures, and in one former broken man who learned to dream again alongside them. We were proof that sometimes the best things in life come when we're not looking for them, that families can form in the most unexpected ways, and that the word home has the power to change everything when it's spoken with love. As I prepared for bed in the house that had once echoed with loneliness and now hummed with the contentment of a large, loving family, I offered a prayer of gratitude for 7 children who'd refused to let me give up on happiness. They'd saved my ranch, my heart, and my soul, and I'd spend the rest of my life making sure they never regretted calling this place home.